I have film from the Weather Channel of the great Chilean earthquake, the earthquake in Chile. I think it was 2009, 2010. It was in January of, I guess it was 2010. And I still have the videotape where a woman is saying, in Chile, saying, we saw colored lights in the sky just before the earthquake occurred. You know, and a lot of people have said, well, this phenomenon of colored lights indicates that HAARP was being used to create the earthquake in Japan in March of 2011. That's not necessarily true. Those auroras, those colored lights in the sky, are a natural phenomenon, because when you have this high voltage generated underground, again, we go back to the basic principle of physics. When you have electric current generated by this high voltage, you know, across the gap between the rocks, high electrical current is generated for a very short period of time. And that high electrical current, zapping on and off instantaneously almost, generates magnetic bursts, magnetic fields, just as the stream of cars would sort of create a tunnel-like magnetic, or tunnel-like, would seem to simulate a tunnel surrounding the cars as they travel through the tunnel. The inside walls of the tunnel would represent the magnetic field created by the stream of cars. Or in the real case, taking that analogy to its actual case, we have the stream of electrons zapping underground across, due to the piezoelectric impact concussion of rocks underground, and as the resultant effect of the stream of electrons between tectonic plates causes electromagnetic fields to be generated, bursting upward into the sky, ionizing the gases in the atmosphere, causing abrupt ionization, and that ionization causes light photons to be emitted when the ionization occurs for an instant. And that's why you see flashes of colored lights in the sky, auroras. And that's similar to the aurora borealis that we notice when the sun puts out tremendous blasts of solar flares. Again, the electrified particles from the sun are hitting the Earth's magnetic field and causing ionization, which results in the aurora borealis. Well, anyway, that's what the electric. So look for the earthquake signs. It reminds me, I started a website titled QuakeSensing.org. The poor guy who was doing the website for me, nobody was supporting him. And I think he's basically put that in a dormant state. But go to the website, try to get it resurrected, QuakeSensing.org.
We are there right now.
Good. Is it there? I hope it's still up.
Yep.
It's up.
Last update was May 5th, 2011. QuakeSensing.org.
People need to help that guy. Send him donations. He's a good webmaster, and he has a great background in earth changes as well. So you send him the information. We can detect earthquakes. We can save lives. Don't let the government tell you that they're the only ones who can help you. They never predict earthquakes, and if they know about it, they won't tell you about it. Because, again, they don't want to disrupt the economy. Look, when we see the signs of the frogs fleeing, swarming out of the ground, or worms, insects swarming out of the ground, when we see other signs such as the auroras in the sky, colored lights, and when we see planetary alignments, we know earthquakes are more frequent during a time of planetary alignment. We put all these signs together, different signals, create a computer program, which I think the webmaster has already created, that would combine all of these different pre-earthquake signs and yield a resultant degree of earthquake danger in a particular point, location on the map. And there would be little target symbols on the map of the United States and maps of other countries at this website, QuakeSensing.org. So people could go to the QuakeSensing.org on a daily basis and see what is the earthquake danger in my area. If I live in the Tulsa, Oklahoma area, for example, I could go to there, zoom in on that particular location and see what is the earthquake danger level based upon residents' input, residents' reported observations of these various earthquake signals. In Italy, I saw on the Weather Channel, they had a report from Italy, as to the people there, the farmers and herdsmen out there. They watch the animals. When their domestic animals start getting restless, they know there's a danger of an earthquake. Animals can sense earthquakes. Art Bell reported following the great tsunami in Asia, Christmas 2004. Art Bell reported from the Washington Post, not one animal, not one elephant was killed in that tsunami. They all fled hours before the tsunami struck.
Wow.
They sensed the undersea earthquake, even though the earthquake was far away, deep in the ocean. They sensed it and fled. So animal observations are a key warning signal, a key indicator of a coming earthquake.
So you want to go to
Rodents fleeing, squirrels going crazy, birds flying, in big droves, making squawking sounds.
so
Birds falling from the sky. That's
Yeah.
another phenomenon. Remember the birds falling from the sky?
Yep.
In many places, Arkansas, all around the world, Sweden, Italy. I mean, there were reports all over the world from birds falling from the sky. Now, what happens is these electrical, this is my theory, and it's only a theory because we haven't had a chance to really investigate, but there seems to be no physical cause for the death of all these birds. But when you have a magnetic field, you can basically kill an animal with an electromagnetic field. Now, birds may be more, because of their size and their, because of their small size, they may be much more vulnerable to electromagnetic fields.
Mm-hmm.
And they may have sensing mechanisms that are dependent upon that. But that could be one reason. The electromagnetic fields generated by this piezoelectric concussion of rocks beneath the ground prior to an earthquake, when the earth is becoming restless, and before an earthquake, maybe that electromagnetic field generated and radiated up into the sky could be the reason why the birds are falling to the earth. Also, we have fish, large fish too, like whales, being killed in masses.
Yeah.
And that could be the same phenomenon with underwater magnetic fields. So,
Yeah, that
these are all signs.
that is an interesting theory.
So quakesensing.org, we need to support the webmaster there with PayPal donations or any kind of donations to get that website up, because lots of people are going to die in the coming earthquakes. And we can predict them and give them the information they need in their locale to prepare for an earthquake. And of course, what would you do, even if you knew about it? Well, the first thing to do, I think, is get out of the building.
Yeah.
Because the collapse of buildings, we've seen it on TV. We have great earthquake training, just by watching the disasters in Turkey and other countries where earthquakes occurred and people are buried under rubble of the buildings or inside the buildings. If you get out of the building, you have a much greater chance of surviving the earthquake. But you have to know about it in advance, which means you have to watch the animals, you have to watch the website that gives us these signs. And basically take it from there. That's all I can say.
You have to be aware of your surroundings. You got to watch the sky. You got to watch the animals, odd animal behavior.
Yeah.
I would think odors emanating from the ground, water main breaks.
Oh yeah, water main breaks. Wow, I'm glad you brought that up.
Sinkholes.
The San Bruno. I've checked into that. That San Bruno inferno that occurred a couple of years ago, due to an underground gas main break. It just sent a ball of fire throughout all the houses in that town, in that area. And of course, the water mains were broken. The firemen couldn't even get water because the water mains were broken. Why? Because of the explosion of the gas main, but the shifting of the earth. Now I checked and I found the exact time, down to the minute, the exact time of the day when that ball of fire erupted, that explosion from the underground gas main. It was a certain minute of the day, and I checked that particular time of day on the earthquake maps, and I found that the San Andreas fault, only about a quarter of a mile or a half mile away from San Bruno, California, had exhibited an earthquake, a small earthquake. But it was, I believe it was the straw that broke the camel's back, because San Bruno had been subjected to numerous earthquakes over the years, little tiny earthquakes. And gradually, little by little, the ground supporting those underground gas mains and water mains began to shift. Empty pockets of air began to form because the earth is vibrating and shaking and shifting. And now, where before you had, very good support of those gas mains at every point along the resting lines of the mains, now you're having pockets of air gaps where there's no support whatsoever underneath the gas main. As a result, you have hundreds of tons of pressure of soil and rock above it pressing down, causing the gas main to gradually shear and break. So that's what happens. And then when it breaks, of course, you have broken metal scraping against broken metal, causing sparks. And any little bit of air that's in that air pocket will ignite the gas, and then the flame will travel right into your house instantaneously.
Yeah.
The whole house becomes a firebomb.
The name of that website again is quakesensing.org. It's all one word, quakesensing.org.
And even if you just donate like $3 a month, put your credit card on $3 a month to the quakesensing.org website, people's lives can be saved that are worth a lot more than $3 a month.
Yes, right now he doesn't have any, doesn't look like he has any contact information up on the website.
He should. I have to check that out. I'm pretty sure he does. Contact, and he's got, if you scroll down, there's a PayPal button, and also his address should be there too. If not, I'll contact him and tell him to get that information up there so people can support him, and we can activate that website.
Yep, there's a donate button way, way, way down at the bottom of the website.
It should be more conspicuous.
Yes, you should have it up at the top.
Yeah.
So he's got all kinds of maps here. He's got a seismic hazards map, various portions of the country. They've got all kinds of information at this website. It's got photos of the tsunami as it was coming in, and they've got the reporting form, and they also have the observations map.
Right, so that reporting form would be for anybody who would notice an earthquake, pre-earthquake sign. They could report it right through the internet, right to that website. And if you get enough people from that area, say Tulsa, Oklahoma, reporting pre-earthquake signs, that would go into the computer program, and the number of pre-earthquake signs reported would generate a higher alarm status, earthquake warning status for that particular locale.
And there's all types of different warnings that people can look for. Strange lights, toads coming out of the ground, swarming of insects, odd behavior involving wildlife, hyperactivity of domestic animals, an increase in the newspaper of lost pets, earthquake swarms, unusual booming-like sounds. We've heard that before.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention that. The booms, I've got them in my area. I've had them, and one time the boom was so loud that it vibrated the house.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bill, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I mean, he's got a whole
what I really like about your program, about what you do, Bill, is nobody else does what you do. You go right to the website and you amplify on the information, and you make it more accessible to people. You take my comment and you just expand upon it so that people can actually be proactive.
Yes, I wish more shows would do this sort of thing. There's no reason at all why, in this day and age, people with the knowledge and the ability can't do something like this. Because we're looking right at this guy's earthquake reporting form right now on the show. We're at his website. You can see everything that's going on there.
And just sign up for $3 a month with PayPal. I mean, I gave him a bunch of money well over, like a lot of money, but I can't continue to do it. I just gave them so much, and then I stopped.
Yeah.
Until people won't start supporting it until they start getting earthquakes. And I just don't want to wait until a lot of people die, men, women, and children die in horrible ways before we start to predict these things.
When this goes up on YouTube, the first sentence of the description will have this website on it. And we will attempt to heavily promote it on all of the websites that we are involved with. Our northernmichigansolar.com, our sunskyMysteries.com, and offgridliving.com, and all of the different websites, and we'll try to get the word out there.
Wonderful, Bill. That's a great public service you're doing. Getting back to the supernatural protection, I try to do this. It's very simple. You don't have to. Don't go to. Well, I won't say don't go to church. I do not go to church. I just pray the Bible. When I read the Bible, I know that the Spirit of God is there. He's with us all the time. After all, my heart would not be beating 30,000 times by itself every night when I go to sleep if it were not some supernatural power that would keep me going. How does my heart beat? How does anybody's heart continue to beat for years and years? It's got to be a supernatural power that created us and gave us the wonderful machine known as the human body. Even the human hand is such a miraculous invention. Four fingers and one opposing thumb. And you can do everything from build a house to play a violin with that hand.
Invent computers. Look through a microscope. Work in outer space. Pick things up on the moon.
And that's just the hand. Look at the eyes, vision and hearing. Stereoscopic vision, stereoscopic hearing, stereophonic hearing. So it's a wonderful machine that's been designed for us because somebody loves us. Some powerful being loves us and wants to protect us. This powerful being is stating over and over again as I read the Bible, and I consciously force myself. And later on I'll explain to you why I have to force myself to imagine the presence of God. Why should we have to force ourselves to imagine that God is here? Why are we so oblivious to the presence of God? Well, there happen to be other supernatural, invisible forces that obscure and block our sensing of that spiritual being who keeps us alive. So we're in a spiritual war. And as a scientist, I'm not speaking metaphysically because I used to rely only on scientific principles, but now I understand that there are principles that are indeed scientific. Even though they are supernatural, they're still based upon scientific phenomena that we do not yet understand, such as dimensions. There is another dimension. I used to hear about that Einstein's theories and other people's theories postulating the existence of other dimensions of existence. Well, anyway, without getting too much into that, the concept is simply force yourself to make yourself aware that there's some invisible being with you. Like a little child, the Lord Jesus says, if you come to me as a little child with all faith and confidence, a little child doesn't doubt that he has that imaginary friend with him. When he's young, he imagines a little imaginary friend. I guess I had an imaginary friend when I was young. Some of us do, some of us don't. But to force ourselves to imagine that there is someone who's with you, protecting you, and that my life was saved supernaturally in that highway accident. Then when you do that, that spiritual being then begins to operate within you and give you thoughts and ideas and impressions that you never would have had before, and guides you. And that supernatural force will protect you, just as I was protected in the auto accident. I am confident that I will be protected in the great disasters that are coming upon the earth.
Yes.
So everyone, please do that. What does it cost you? What does it cost to imagine the presence of God, even if you don't believe? It costs you nothing, not even a penny. But what it costs you is some time that you could have wasted instead of spending the time watching nonsense, ridiculous, irritating commercials on television and sports events that'll never get you anywhere and TV shows that'll never get you anywhere but closer to the grave. Instead of wasting your time doing that, spend some time during the day, each day, even as you're washing dishes, mowing the lawn, whatever, doing your chores, visualizing, or imagining the presence of God, and just leave it at that and let God take over. You don't have to talk to him. Just say, hey, I'm walking with, there's a spirit walking with me, and you'll be amazed at the miracles that will result.
Yes, I've actually talked about this on the show before. We've had ministers on. We have had some very, very strong Christians on the show, and we have spoken about this subject at length. And one of the, if you didn't see the show a few weeks ago, we had a minister on, and we actually blessed our show. Our show is now blessed by an actual minister, believe it or not. And we prayed during the show and everything. It was great.
Well, continue to do that. I mean, it's a daily thing. It's a daily activity. And the blessing is actually, in reality, it's the Spirit of God is responding to you, to your conscious awareness of his presence. And that's what the wonderful thing is. You can still do your chores because you don't have to take your mind off of what you're doing and dream up some prayer. No, don't even talk to God. Just listen for God. As you work, as you go about your daily mundane activities, we get closer and closer to death.
It's a lot like meditation, folks.
Yeah, and it's working meditation. You could meditate while you're in a relaxed state, sitting in a relaxed pose, like a Hindu or a meditation therapist, or you can just go about your daily activities and knowing that God is there. But we forget. We keep on forgetting and getting distracted. That is as a result of spiritual beings that are deliberately trying to intervene and break our awareness, our awareness from the presence of God.
Do you know who Russ Dizdar is?
Yes, I've heard of him.
Yes,
I've heard him on the radio a few times.
He was on the show a couple of weeks ago. He has actually been attacked by these demons.
Oh, I'll tell you. You know, I'm glad you mentioned that. There is a video titled, you can look this up, "In the Grip of Evil." In the Grip of Evil. It's on DVD. And it chronicles cases where these demons actually really created great havoc in a person's life. But remember, they don't want to be noticed, and they really don't want you to be an evil, bad person. Their only purpose is to prevent you and distract you away from awareness of the presence of that invisible creator who keeps your heart pumping every second. If we would just passively communicate, passively know, like right now as I'm talking, I've been forgetting that the great powerful God creator is with us right now. I've been forgetting it and talking about other things. So the human mind kind of gets distracted easily, and it's these spirits that keep us away from that. In fact, look at some of the examples. If people talk about Buddha, if I talk about Buddha to a crowd of people, they most of them will be fascinated by the subject,
right,
or by some other god.
Yeah.
But if I talk about one particular god or one particular spiritual being who is written about in a book called the Bible, they get angry at me. They start, I don't want to hear it. Now, why is that? Why did they get angry, and why did I get so angry when people mentioned God the Savior to me years ago, or throughout the years? There's got to be a reason why. Why wasn't I fascinated with the subject of the supernatural being and the stories of his appearance on earth? When others are, such as my brother, are fascinated by the concept of Buddhism. Well, we know that the spiritual beings are influencing everybody on this earth.
Yeah, you know, and if people can believe that, you know, people go and they watch science fiction movies about all this kind of stuff, about evil entities and beings and monsters and Jason and Friday the 13th and everything else. You know, I don't understand why they can't grasp the simple concept of the absolute reverse of that.
Supernatural beings influence the thoughts of people.
Yes.
And they distract and cause hatred. The hatred itself is evidence that supernatural beings are steering our conscious and subconscious minds.
Yes, exactly.
There was a man named Howard Pittman, and he, and not only him, but other people have expressed their experiences in out-of-body experiences, where they had died for a short period of time and were revived, but during the time of death they were taken out of their body. And this Howard Pittman was in a hospital dying, and he was taken out of his body by an angel and shown the demons, that the invisible demons which surround all of us. And he saw a man and a woman in a private conversation within this hospital when he was in an out-of-body experience. And the man and woman were, I guess, suggestively speaking to one another privately. And as man was becoming more aroused, he saw this ugly, despicable, disgusting demon slowly crawling into the man. That's what he describes. Other people have described the same thing. There was a psychic, a great psychic, who passed away a number of years ago. It's Alex Tanous, Tanous. You can look him up. I have him on videotape, where he was asked by the people who were studying Earth changes and the coming disasters back in the 1980s. He was asked to try to find the lost cities submerged, the lost cities of Atlantis, submerged beneath the ocean. Now, this man was a psychic, Alex Tanous. He was hired by police departments to locate missing objects and people. So he had a track record already of being a psychic who could locate things. So I'm going to quote him, paraphrase him from this videotape, going back to around 1980. He said, "I went to the Bermuda Triangle to try to find this evidence. I went out of my body. Part of me went out of my body and swam deep beneath the ocean. I saw this lost city. I saw marble staircases, spiral staircases, columns, archways, buildings of marble. It was the most spectacular sight I have ever seen." And then they go on to say that a lot of people didn't take Alex Tanous seriously until teams of divers were sent to the exact location that Alex Tanous stated in his out-of-body experience, the same coordinates off the coast of Florida, where they located 40 miles off the coast of Florida, the Bimini Road, that 1,000-yard long wall. Now, of course, it's now encrusted in coral.
Right.
All this sunken city is encrusted in coral. But what Alex Tanous was seeing was that city that existed thousands of years ago before it sank into the ocean, or when it sank. And they came with a boat, with a ship, to the location, and they were right above, and they did a sonar videogram picture of a pyramid that was located sunken beneath the ocean, right below where the ship had anchored, or the ship had stopped. And the capstone of the pyramid was missing, just like on your dollar bill, the capstone. So these people were occultists, Freemasons, involved with the same kind of occult practices and worship that exists today.
Wow.
Among the higher echelons, the leaders of the world. And how do the leaders of the world get their power? By worshiping a powerful being who is given temporary rulership over the earth. That being is declared to be Satan in the Bible, but he's only temporary ruler, and people get their power by worshiping Satan. Now, we may not believe, many people may not believe in Satan, but the people at the highest pinnacles of power in the world do worship Satan as God. You'll find that in the landmark book Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike, Grand Sovereign Commander of the ancient and accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry, written in the late 1800s. In the book Morals and Dogma, he states that we, as Freemasons, and that's Skull and Bones, George Herbert Walker Bush, George W. Bush, John Kerry, etc., Skull and Bones, Central Intelligence Agency, Skull and Bones, they worship Lucifer, they call him Lucifer, as God. So we may not believe it, but these guys who wield the reins of power indeed believe it, to the point of worshiping it. And if they don't worship him, they lose their pinnacle of power.
Wow. Yeah, we've got Morals and Dogma up on the screen right now by Albert Pike.
Yes,
that's
of Little Rock, Arkansas.
Born on December 29th, 1809. He was the oldest of 6 children and was raised in a Christian home and attended an Episcopal church. So we have that information up there. That's at, oh boy, that's a long website name. It's called Freemasons-Freemasonry.com. And they have all of the information about Albert Pike and his book, Morals and Dogma. So that's something that the audience can research on their own.
Right, so how do we get into all this? We're talking about the pyramid on the capstone, missing capstone on the pyramid submerged beneath the ocean. And what this city that was found off the coast of Florida, it was part of a network of cities that had separated, evidently, when these land masses were sunk beneath hundreds of feet of tidal waves during the great catastrophe around 9000 BC. This is what the great scholars tell us, that the great sinking of the continent of Atlantis occurred around 9000 BC. Now, if you do the simple arithmetic, if you go back 36.5 centuries, that would be the past incursion of this planet X, causing global destruction during the time of the Exodus. That's 1650 BC, 36.5 centuries. Go back another orbital period of planet X from 1650 BC back to, you land on 5300 BC, 5300 BC, a point in time when geologists Pittman and Ryan, Pitman, and Ryan say that their studies of the Black Sea show that the great flood of Noah's day occurred around 5300 BC. Okay, so we've gone back 2 orbital periods of 36.5 centuries each, and we see the destruction of the Exodus, during the Exodus of Egypt, and then prior to that, the destruction, prior orbital period, destruction of the world during the great flood of Noah's day. Go back another 36.5 centuries from 5300 BC back, you land on around 9000 BC, the sinking of Atlantis.
Yep, right there.
And that's what the great late archaeologist and ancient historian, his name is Asarias Santos. He passed away. I was watching a video of him today. He says, yes, it was around 9000 BC that Atlantis sunk beneath the waves. And the horizonproject.com also states that around 9000 BC this occurred. They had a great technology, and I found this hard to believe, but both Santos and the Horizon Project and other scholars, I imagine, all state that there were high technology existed back then around 9000 BC, and that Atlantis was sort of similar to the United States. It was a great, powerful, bloodthirsty, greedy empire, just like the United States. I hate to say that. I mean, I'm a former Marine Corps enlisted man, and so I am patriotic to the people of the United States and the Constitution, but not to the criminals who have usurped our country. So I say the United States is now a greedy, bloodthirsty empire, just as Atlantis was, and Atlantis suffered a punishment of total destruction. God says he will save those people who call out to him. So even though this country and the world may be going down, I'm warning, helping to alert other people that they can be supernaturally protected by the one God, the God who says, hey, look, I'm the one who's causing all this destruction. And I can show you evidence where the Bible, God says in the Bible, I am going to bring. I got the spiritual sensing to go to a particular point. This was about 3 years ago, to go to a particular point in the Bible. I got this compulsion to go to the book of Isaiah, chapter 63, verse 6. You might look that up on the internet, on the King James Version. Isaiah 63, verse 6, the word strength. Now, I don't know what made me zero in on the word strength, except that the first 6 verses of Isaiah 63 highly suggested a red object coming in from space, causing great disaster upon the earth. Blood red object. Well, I looked up the word strength and found out in the Strong's Concordance of the Hebrew language the actual meaning of the word strength. Well, the word strength had been grossly mistranslated by the English translators from its original Hebrew, because the Old Testament was written originally in Hebrew. The word strength is really not the word strength at all. That particular Hebrew word, strength in English, was used 230 times. I counted it. It was used 230 times in the Old Testament, the English word strength. Not one of them, not one out of 230 usages of the word strength in the Old Testament used that particular nuance or that particular definition that they chose, the translators chose, for Isaiah 63, verse 6. So it was a gross mistranslation because they couldn't make sense of it. They were scratching their heads. They were trying to fit a square peg into a round hole to make that verse make sense, and it didn't make sense. So I looked up the word, and here's what the real translation is this. I'm going to paraphrase. God says, I will trample the people in my fury. I will cause their blood to spurt out on my garments. I will bring from the greatest distance away my bright red, glittering, blood-red object to its goal from the greatest distance away to planet Earth. That's exactly what it says, and I can absolutely prove it because I reference the actual Hebrew definitions of that word, which are Strong's Concordance Index numbers 5332, 5331, and 5329. And you will see all those three add color and nuance to give you a complete definition that I just described. I will bring, God says, from the greatest distance away, my bright, red, glittering object to its goal, planet Earth.
Wow. That's pretty telling.
So God is saying, I'm going to do this destruction. But then again, in the following verses, he says, those who call out to me, I will protect them. I will save them. And he calls himself the Savior, even in the Old Testament of Isaiah, written around 600 BC, 600 years before the Lord Yahshua, God the Savior, came to earth. He says, I am the Savior, and I will save you as I come to wreak destruction upon the rest of those who fail to call out to me.
And all you have to do is ask for the help.
That's all. And that's all we can do. We have no other choice when the earth starts to scorch and the tidal waves inundate land masses. The book of Peter, 2 Peter, was spiritually inspired. Peter spoke from what God, the Spirit, told him. He says, look, now why would he make this up? And how could he make this up? He says the world is going to be destroyed by fire. The elements will melt with fervent heat. And I woke up, again, I think, as a scientist, as a science teacher, physics teacher, and electronics engineer. I mean, I've always had my feet planted on sound scientific principles. So, but yet I'm telling you this, that I woke up in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock in the morning one night, a year or so ago. I had this vivid dream. I just sat up straight like a light switch turning on.
Mm-hmm.
Sat up straight in bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was having a dream, a vivid dream. I saw the entire earth engulfed in gray and red flaming lava. And it occurred to me immediately, that is the lake of fire that's spoken about in the book of Revelation. The lake of fire. The entire world will become a lake of fire. But those who call out to God will be lifted up supernaturally. It says, the Bible says, in an instant, in a flash, in a twinkling of an eye. So it's our spirits that will be taken up, because the spirit doesn't have any mass. It has mostly, well, very little mass, but mostly energy. The spirit can be zapped up like an electrical current can be zapped up to the sky. Like a particle beam can be shot up to the sky. That's how our spirit will be taken up prior to the destruction. And we will go through hell on earth. There's going to be no saving people who call themselves believers.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to suffer hell on earth, but the ultimate destruction, prior to that, I firmly believe, it's going to be where our spirits will be zapped up. And the Bible tells us that we will get a new body, supernatural, indestructible body. We will not be plasma floating around. And we will be saved, and then the entire earth, with all those remaining, will be engulfed in flames. And I'm just hoping that everybody calls out to God, because everybody can be saved if they would call out to Him. But some people evidently will not.
No, they won't.
So that's the lake of fire, the entire globe engulfed in flaming lava. It makes sense, though, when you see all that magma, which is hundreds of miles deep beneath the crust of the earth, erupting all over the globe.
Yeah, that's some pretty heavy stuff, John. That's
yeah. I mean, so the only comfort we get is, calling out to God, because if I sat by and said, well, there's no God, I would be in such terror. I don't think I can continue on. But I can go on because I have that belief, that knowledge, that there is a spiritual being that loves me, that gave me this miraculous machine, the human body, and keeps my heart beating 30,000 times every night when I go to sleep, and who loves me and promises that He will protect me, and the supernatural events that I see arising from the predictions of the Bible, the supernatural events telling us what's going to happen. All that proves to me that there is a God who promises to save us. He tells us, for example, hey, look, I know what's going to happen. There's going to be a meteor crashing into the oceans that's going to pollute all the waters. 1/3 of the waters will be turned to wormwood. And isn't that what happened in Egypt?
Yeah.
There was some kind of pollution of the waters. We don't know exactly. I think it was iron oxide dust that's from the tail of this comet that sweeps the earth and pollutes all the waters. And then we know two things. The book of Exodus, the book of Revelation is the book of Exodus deja vu, all over again. For example, in the book of Exodus, it tells us that one of the plagues was flaming rocks coming down, hitting the earth. It was rocks, hail, it says. But I believe it was rock hail. Because what happens is when a celestial body, like one of the accompanying comets surrounding Planet X, swarm of comets gets very close to Earth. Planet X itself will come maybe 15, 20 million miles, this is what they believe, away from Earth, but it'll have a swarm of comets, some of which are going to be very close to Earth. And when they get very close, again, the electrical potential, that static electricity, a plasma-engulfed comet coming close to Earth, it will generate an electric force field. We see that when we touch a metal object as we walk across the carpet. Our body is saturated, picks up static electrons. And as we touch the metal doorknob or metal object, such as a car door on a cold day, all of a sudden, before your finger makes contact with the metal door, you get this stinging zap that occurs. That's caused by hundreds of volts of electricity, believe it or not. Hundreds of volts of electricity.
Even thousands of volts sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes even thousands. But the current is not high enough to kill you. But it's still high, and that's why you get that sting. So this is all basic physics that we have experienced painfully in our lives. When this comet gets close, it gets close enough so that it punctures the insulation gap of air between the comet, the close-flying comet in the sky, and the Earth itself. And it creates electrical discharges. Now, the rocks surrounding this debris field of rocks surrounding the comet, the debris field of rocks and dust is all over the place. It's a mess. It's a geological mess in space. Those rocks begin to be gravitationally sucked into the Earth's gravitational force field and be plunged to Earth, accelerate to Earth. As they do so, the trail that the rocks make in their plunge to Earth creates a low electrical resistance path. A low electrical resistance path for the discharge of the plasma, the electrified gases saturating that comet. So the rock itself pulls charge to the ground in an electrical zapping motion. A streak of electrified rock hits the ground. When it hits the Earth, which is low potential, ground potential, zero electrical potential, you can see the sparks. You can see the flame. And that's exactly what is described if you look at the book of Exodus. It says, hail was plunging to the ground, and trails of fire, almost like machine gun fire that you see in the movies, machine gun fire piercing the Earth in a stream. You see this electrical fire trailing along with the rocks that are falling to the ground. It's very vividly described in the book of Exodus. Nobody has ever bothered to figure out to explain the very simple physical principles that would justify and explain this phenomenon. But it's there. There it is, very simple. You create a low resistance path through the falling rock, and that creates a discharge path for the electrons, which travel sort of in a streak along with the rock, each rock that hits the ground. And that's the flame of fire, the trail of fire that penetrates the ground in this hailstorm. And again, you have this phenomenon redescribed again in the book of Revelation, stating that this is going to happen again. If you go to Revelation chapter 8, I think it says, blood mingled with fire falls to the earth. Imagine that, blood mingled with fire falling to the earth. Well, that's exactly what was the phenomenon that was described in the book of Exodus. Flaming looked like blood because of the red discharging electricity hitting the ground along with the rocks. Now, if you go to a secular account of this very same disaster that occurred around 1650 BC, secular account by the few surviving Egyptians who lived through those plagues of Egypt, described in the Bible, the Ipuwer papyrus, I-P-U-W-E-R. Papyrus is a paper that they wrote on, the scrolls that they wrote on in ancient Egypt. In that Ipuwer papyrus, which is still, I believe, on display at the Museum of Leiden, Leyden, in the Netherlands, that Ipuwer papyrus and the Colburn Bible, which is derived from that, states that, and I can paraphrase some parts of that Colburn Bible, this ancient account of what happened in Egypt. It says, people forget the days of the destroyer. This incoming planet is called the destroyer. And they forget the days of the destroyer and that it will return during its appointed hour. During normal, and I'm going to paraphrase it to make it more understandable, during a normal course of the stars, we can predict their movement. The courses of the stars, just as, the zodiac, for example, we know what months each constellation of the zodiac appears. But all of a sudden, at one point, the stars become restless. We can no longer predict their movement. They become restless. Well, the Earth is beginning to wobble. So we look up in the sky and we don't know where the stars are anymore. They seem to be swirling around. And that swirling will occur gradually. We're going to look up in the sky and say, wait a minute, that constellation is not quite where it's supposed to be. And the Inuit Indians of Alaska are saying, wait a minute, the sun is not, we live by the sun rising over the icy horizon, and when that sun is not rising where it's supposed to be for this particular day of the year. So the Inuit Indians are also expressing alarm. You can see that on YouTube, the actual Inuit Eskimos talking about this phenomena. So the Earth begins to wobble. The stars, and it says the stars are no longer constant in their movement and no longer predictable. That is when the destroyer is approaching, it says. And then it goes on to say, when blood drops upon the earth, well, there you go. That's another characterization of the flaming rocks being sucked into Earth's gravitational force field.
And we already
when blood drops upon the earth, mountains will open up and belch forth fire and smoke. Seas will be swallowed up by the land, and oceans will boil. Wow.
Wow.
You see, we're going to have emerging land masses coming up from the seabeds. That's why the seas will be swallowed up by the land, because land masses will arise in the oceans. Edgar Cayce in a supernatural trance. Now, if anybody is proof, scientific proof, of spiritual connection, Edgar Cayce is. You probably can tell us a lot about Edgar Cayce, Bill.
I don't know that much about him. I have...
Okay, well, the Association for Research and Enlightenment is a huge library in Virginia Beach, Virginia. It contains 14,000 or more Edgar Cayce readings. Now, an Edgar Cayce reading was, this man would go into a trance. He would be hypnotized. He started out with hypnosis back in the early 20th century. And he didn't know what he was doing. He was using hypnosis to try to heal his wife, who was sick. He hypnotized her, and somehow it worked. I don't know exactly the whole story. I have to find out more about it. But it went on to the point where when he would go into the hypnotic trances, people would come to him or even send letters regarding their severe health problems. And he would go into a trance. He didn't know what he was saying, but his wife and secretary would record every word. And it's all documented at the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, Virginia. One case was a woman in a mental institution. She was mentally insane, and Cayce didn't even see her. He just had to get the letter about her, and he went into a trance and said she's got a wisdom tooth that is impacting upon a nerve in her brain, and a nerve leading from a tooth to the brain. And they said, oh, that's ridiculous now. How could that have caused her to be insane? Well, they sent a dentist in to remove the tooth. The woman was cured. She was no longer insane. Another case, the woman had a severe festering of a wound which was growing to the point on her leg that the leg would have to be amputated. He went into a trance, and this was all dramatized by ABC television with the Ancient Prophecy documentary narrated by David McCallum.
Mm-hmm. I saw
He would went into the trance, and he said, we are going through the streets of her town. We're going through State Street, past this street. Now we're at the house. We're going into the house. Something is cooking on the stove. We go upstairs, and, oh, yes, we have the body. The woman Laura has a severe festering wound on her leg. And he says, oh, yes, now we're going through the heart. We're going through the lungs. We're going through the arterial system. Now we're at the wound. The woman, her leg, she has been bitten by a recluse spider, a tiny brown spider, which, of course, we know causes really tremendous destruction of the flesh, a flesh-eating type of effect from these recluse spiders. He said, oil of smoke will save her leg. Bancroft Pharmacy, top shelf. Oil of smoke. So they called the Bancroft Pharmacy in Chicago. And the pharmacist said, no, we don't have that. I'm looking on the shelf right now. That's an old patent medicine. They went bankrupt around 1911. And they went back to Casey and said, there's no oil smoke. What are you talking about? He said, look behind the blue bottle. So they called the Bancroft Pharmacy again, and the Bancroft pharmacist said, oh, yeah, I moved the blue bottle, and sure enough, the oil of smoke is there. We'll get it out to you right away. So this is a true story. I mean, again, why would it be documented so vividly on the Ancient Prophecies documentary by ABC TV during prime time, narrated by David McCallum? This was a wonderfully documented broadcast, and you can find that also in the archives at the Association for Research and Enlightenment, ARE.
We are there right now.
Right. So now, here's the thing about Edgar Casey. It goes on to say this. We have found that anytime someone can predict these horrible, catastrophic events upon the earth, that seer or prophet, in the case of Casey, he was a sleeping prophet. He can only say these things when he was asleep. He had no knowledge when he was awake of what he had said during his trance. In fact, I have a book titled Edgar Casey on Atlantis, and he talks about the high technology that existed during the empire of Atlantis around 9000 BC, and about the crystals that were used. So Edgar Casey was able to go back in his trances and see these events that had occurred thousands of years ago. Well, what he said in one of his trances, and the reason why I'm bringing Casey into it is because here's what he said, quote, in some of his trances. He was a healer, but he was also a predictor of catastrophes. Just like all other healers were able to predict earth catastrophes as well. He said in a trance, the greater portion of Japan must go into the sea. He also said Los Angeles, San Francisco, all of these will be destroyed before New York.
So what that could very well be if land masses are raising up out of the oceans, it's going to displace the water that's in the oceans, and the water's going to have to go somewhere.
And also the earthquakes. I mean, we're the San Andreas Fault and the New Madrid Fault. Lots of people live in the lower Midwest. That New Madrid Fault is going to be even more devastating because it covers, it affects a lot more people. But the San Andreas Fault, I've got an article from one of the newspapers, major newspaper, stating that the big earthquake in California is, it seems to be becoming more and more looming on the horizon. That's what these articles are stating. And I'll tell you, I got to tell you another story. I mean, I don't know if we're wasting a lot of time here.
This is great.
Prophets are so amazing. Casey told us, he said, when in a trance, he said, when you see the eruption, now we got to remember these omens. When you see the eruption of either Mount Vesuvius in Italy or the eruption of Mount Pelée in the Lesser Antilles, either one of those, not both of them, but either one, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius or the eruption of Mount Pelée in the Lesser Antilles, then you can expect the great California earthquakes to occur about 3 months thereafter. California, the whole western area, even up to Nevada, huge earthquakes. So we've got to be prepared for this, to try to look for the warning signs of these earthquakes to try to save lives. I've got a friend working with me. He's a former military guy, former colonel in the Army. And he's gotten very involved with this Joe Brandt prophecy. Joe Brandt, you can look that up. What an amazing story. Brandt, Joseph Brandt. Now, Joe Brandt, around 1965, he was in his 40s, and during Christmas time, they were celebrating Christmas Eve, and Joe Brandt started to talk about the prophecy of the great California earthquake that he saw. He had it written down. He took his papers that he had written down when he was back in 1937, when he was a 17-year-old boy in California. He fell off of his horse, got a concussion, was going in and out of unconsciousness. And he wrote down his accounts of what visions he was seeing while he was going in and out of consciousness in a Fresno, California hospital. He wrote down these notes and he revealed them to his wife and his friends who were at this Christmas party in 1965. And later on, one of his friends took the notes and went through it and was amazed, and it's been published, the Joe Brandt, B-R-A-N-D-T prophecy. What he saw was, and my friend is working with me, that we're thinking that maybe this might occur next year, in the spring of 2012. I don't mean next year, I mean this year, spring of 2012. Joe Brandt was there. Nobody could see him. He was there on Hollywood Boulevard in Hollywood, near Hollywood and Vine. Mm-hmm. And he saw a marquee with a blonde, one or two blondes. I'll have to go back and read up on it again. One or two blondes with long legs in a white dress, I think. There's a marquee. There should be a marquee there now that he saw a vision of in 1937. He also saw young guys in their late teens, early 20s, walking around with beards and earrings. Now, in 1937, young men did not have beards nor earrings. So how did Joe Brandt imagine this? He couldn't have imagined it. A myth, something, out of his own mind, created from his own mind. It must have been something that a supernatural prediction of the future, to see young men with beards and earrings and girls with very short skirts. Girls did not have short skirts in 1937 when Joe Brandt was in the hospital going in and out of consciousness. Girls wore long dresses. I mean, look at the films. Everything was very prudish back then. And the girls had frowsy hair. Now, I looked up that word frowsy. It means unkempt, disheveled, sticking out. Well, that's what the punk hairdo is, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, if we see all of those signs, those signs of social trends, men with beards and earrings, women with short skirts and frowsy, sticking out hair, then we know that we're probably getting close to the time of the Great California Earthquake. Because Joe Brandt goes on to say that he was watching the people, and they were walking up, and he was describing all these different people walking by, and a woman came by, an older woman. She had her little white dog, and she even mentioned a name in his vision, his dream. She said, "Come on, Frau, let's get out of here. Things are getting a little bit, I don't know what's going on here, but let's go back to the apartment." So he even mentioned a woman with her white dog, I think it was, a little white dog, named Frau. And I contacted somebody I know who has a business out near Hollywood and Vine. I got to get back in touch with him and ask him to look for some of those signs, and some people in Los Angeles who can watch out for these signs. He even looked at the clock on the marquee of the movie theater, and it was like 10 minutes till 4 or something like that. So it was a very detailed vision that he had. And at that time, all of a sudden, just the earth started to shake, and the cars, these little cars, he said little cars or whatever, some of them, began to slide sideways from the road onto the curb. And there was, he went on to describe all the earthquake devastation that occurred. So now is the time for us to get really seriously study Joe Brandt's prophecy. Maybe we can save lives.
Yeah, I'm on his I'm on that website right now, highlighting some of the things that you've been talking about.
So we've got a lot of prophecy.
Yes.
And it is got from God. Evidently, God is trying to warn people. Why would he give Joe Brandt this message? Somebody loves us. Somebody knows the future, and they love us, and they want to warn us. Jim Singer was another. He was a plant manager, just a factory manager in Toronto, Canada. And he was an immigrant guy, I think from Slovenia, or out in the Balkans, I believe. And he never was indulged in anything like the supernatural at all. He was just a basic down-to-earth working man. And one day his wife said, all of a sudden he went into a trance, and she thought he was having a heart attack. And then, again, this was stated in one of the ancient prophecy documentaries by David McCallum. He went into a trance, and he says, in that trance, in that dream, a man appeared to me, an angel, a man. And he told me that there would be a plane crash. And no place, no time, no name of the airline, nothing. Just the plane would crash into emerald green cornfields. And a couple weeks later, but the vision was that, well, anyway, a couple of weeks later, he was reading a magazine in the office, a doctor's office or dentist's office, and he saw the report of this plane crash in green emerald cornfields, and he was shocked. What the angel told him in the dream was that if we don't turn to God, this destruction will come upon the earth. And what he described was people. He says, I didn't see any, it wasn't told where it would be, but I saw people staggering about, dazed, out of it, totally unaware of what's going on, totally dazed by the destruction, begging for a drink of water, and nobody would give it to them.
Wow.
Now, go to another prophecy, the three girls in Garabandal, Spain in 1964. These were 3 or 4 peasant girls. They were out in the field stealing apples. And this was related by Maurice Sirocco, I believe, who studied this whole thing of the Garabandal, Spain, Garabandal, Garabandal, Spain. In 1964, they were out in the field stealing apples. It was a clear, bright day, no clouds whatsoever. All of a sudden, this is described by one of the girls who was now an adult. She said there was a boom, like a loud bomb, but there was no clouds in the sky, no rain. Suddenly, one of the girls falls down to her knees in a trance. Now, all the other girls think that she's sick, and then they go to tell their mother, and then they fall down in a trance also. And they come back to the village later on after the trance and described, they were all excited, and they said, we have seen the angel. And they were so excited and disturbed. Well, these visions went on, and at one point in time, there was a night when these girls were given a vision by the angels, and they screamed. It was called the Night of Screams. Their visions were so horrible. Mm-hmm. And what Maurice Sirocco recounts from their revelation was that these girls said that at some point in time, not a single electric motor will operate anywhere on the earth. Now, wait a minute. I can apply that to physics, the principles of physics. If you have a huge magnetic field that engulfs the entire planet, so strong, it would overwhelm, and saturate and wipe out all the electromagnetic fields within the electric motors. Even though those electric motors are shielded in a metal case, their electromagnetic fields would be wiped out, and thus the electric motors would not be able to operate. If Earth was engulfed in a huge, devastating, powerful electromagnetic field caused by a passing comet. Now, basic physics, when again, going back to a stream of a moving charge or a massive comet saturated with electrical charge in motion, passing by Earth, it generates a billowing tunnel-like electromagnetic field that radiates and billows outward in all directions, sort of like inside of a microwave oven. That's what you have. You have electromagnetic fields billowing out, radiating, cutting through, invisibly cutting through the food and heating up the moisture in the food. Likewise, this passing object would have an invisible field that billows out and radiates outward from its path of travel, sweeping through the Earth, cutting through the entire Earth, and overwhelming all the electromagnetic fields within the electric motors on the planet. That would describe these ignorant girls, these young girls who were totally ignorant of physics and had no knowledge of science whatsoever. That would describe their vision that the angel told them that not a single electric motor will operate anywhere in the world. That's amazing. I mean, that sort of tells you that there has got to be some truth to that prophecy, since they knew that.
All of these, I believe they all tie together. But do you know what we have done once again, John?
End of the line.
We have talked for another 3 hours.
Wow.
Actually, we've gone over 3 hours this time.
Wow.
So
get a good night's sleep.
Yes.
I'm going to need one.
Yes, we're going to need a good night's sleep. Let me ask you a question. What are you doing next Saturday?
I guess I'll be around.
Okay. We can, if you want to, we can continue this conversation then.
Great.
We'll start up with this, and folks will definitely get into a little bit of the different types of things that you can do to survive these coming calamities. In fact, let me switch over to camera 2. We were going to talk about this tonight. That is, in fact, on camera 2 right now, one of our deep cycle batteries that we use for our alternative energy setup here at in the studio. You can see it right there. That's a deep cycle battery. That's 110 amp hours worth of deep cycle battery right there. And next week, what we're going to do is we are going to make sure that we definitely talk about some survival techniques and aspects, because, well, we know all of this stuff is coming because this is just there's just too many things to say to yourself, well, you know, this guy in 1937, he didn't know what he was talking about. The little kids in Fatima, they didn't know what they're talking about. Edgar Casey, he didn't know what he was talking about. This minister, he didn't know what he was talking about. You know, and these little girls in in Spain, they didn't know what they were talking about. There's too many coincidences here to just blow them off. And I think that's what John and I are getting at here at the end of the show, which we are going to end right now, and then I'm going to begin loading this up to YouTube so that we can all watch the replay. And the replay will begin here on the stream momentarily, and we'll let that play for a few days. And I believe next Tuesday we have a guest coming on, but I don't know who it is at this point. So I am going to say good evening. John, hang on the line for just a minute. And I am going to turn the stream off now. I'd like to thank everybody for showing up and enjoying the show. I certainly hope it was enjoyable and informative. And we will see you on our next broadcast.